Hello there ladies and gentlemen, I'm Paul TX14 Walsh, welcoming you to an all new Ace in the Day gameplay for the arcade mode of War Thunder. In today's episode we shall be reviewing, by popular demand, the Bell P-63A-5 Kingcobra, an American fighter aircraft coming to Tier 3 and a battle rating of 3.7. For the purposes of today's historical overview, we shall be covering the Kingcobra from its inception through to the A5 subvariant. With that, let's begin. Bell's decision to remove the supercharger from the P-39 Aircobra's Allison engine in the later stages of the P-39's development was to prove costly to the plane's high altitude performance. To overcome this issue, Bell Aircraft proposed two solutions in February of 1941, both under the designation of Model 33. The first was the XP-39E, which was a P-39D with two major changes: a new laminar flow wing and the usage of the in-development Continental IV-1430 liquid-cooled hyper engine, which promised a power output of at least 2,000 horsepower. The second solution was the XP-63 Kingcobra, which would be a larger, more powerful fighter design based off of the P-39's basic layout. This plane would be made for the roles of close support fighter and fighter bomber. Starting with the XP-39E, three prototypes were ordered in April of 1941 and were powered by Allison V1710-47 liquid-cooled V12 engines in the end. This was due to a series of development problems affecting the originally proposed Continental engine. Yet despite the Allison engine only providing 1,325 horsepower, the XP-39E still proved to be faster than the P-39D over the course of its test flight program, which began on the 21st of February 1942. Unfortunately, this was the only improvement seen in the XP-39E compared to the preceding D variant, whereby in all other performance categories the D was superior, meaning the XP-39E's development program would be scrapped by the end of 1942. The XP-63 followed then, and would field the same Allison V1710-47 engine, which accommodated a hydraulically driven supercharger as located behind the cockpit. The XP-63 also featured a new laminar flow wing. An order for two prototypes was placed on the 27th of June 1941, with the first prototype making its maiden flight on the 7th of December 1942. The plane was to be armed with the same armament as the in-service P-39Q, one 37mm M4 cannon firing through the propeller hub, two 12.7mm M2 Browning machine guns in the engine cowling, and two 12.7mm M2 Browning machine guns as mounted in underwing gondolas. Initial test flights were promising, yet the first prototype was damaged beyond repair on the 28th of January 1943 as its tricycle landing gear failed to extend during landing. The second prototype was to follow a similar fate, flying for the first time on the 5th of February 1943, but lost mid-flight due to engine failure on the 25th of May 1943. A third prototype had been ordered in June of 1942 as the XP-63B, whereby this was intended to act as a testbed for the installation of a Rolls-Royce Merlin engine. However, due to the low availability of the Merlin engine at the time, the decision was taken to fit a 1,500 horsepower Allison V1710-93 engine, leading to the prototype being redesignated as the XP-63A. This prototype also saw the addition of a new dorsal air scoop and exhaust pipes, along with the ability to mount a 500-pound or 227kg bomb under the fuselage. Test flights showed the prototype to be the fastest of the Kingcobras to date, reaching a top speed of 426 mph or 685 km/h at an altitude of 20,000 feet or 6,096 meters. As the P-63 had already been ordered into immediate production as of 29th of September 1942, the first P-63As were delivered as of October 1943, whereby these initial production P-63As were designated as P-63A1s in terms of subvariant. The next production block, the P-63A-5, as seen on screen today, would differ by having over double the armour plating of the A1, i.e. 178.8 pounds compared to 87.7 pounds. The A5 would be succeeded by the A6 production block. And with our historical review concluded, let us take a look at how the P-63A-5 Kingcobra handles in the skies of War Thunder Arcade. Today's gameplay is brought to you from the ground strike map African Canyon. For this we'll be using the following setup. Stealth belts for our machine guns, the reason being that we do not want to confuse the tracer of our machine gun rounds with the tracer of our cannon. To eliminate this issue completely, we use the stealth belts which have no tracer attributed to the machine gun rounds. We're using the default belts for our 37mm cannon, the reason being that these belts consist solely of high explosive fragmentation incendiary tracer shells, which are absolutely devastating against any given foe, requiring typically a single hit to take down a fighter and 2 to 5 hits to take down the most durable bombers. Our gun convergence is set to 400 meters. The reason for this affecting only our 2 wing mounted machine guns, is that at a distance of 600 metres, you'll find that the difference in muzzle velocity between your machine guns and your 37mm cannon is incredibly punishing if not compensated for. And when you look at the aiming reticule, you'll see that the aiming reticule is always set to the highest caliber weapon available on the plane, so the 37mm cannon typically. And when you open fire, your machine guns will typically go on a path which is roughly 1/3 the distance closer to your target compared to the 37mm cannon. At a distance of 400 metres, this differential is roughly 1/4 of the distance to the target, meaning that you can start to compensate for the difference in muzzle velocity between your cannon and machine guns more effectively. And in closer range dogfights, if you're going down to 300 metres or so, the 400 metre gun convergence works even better as you start to get closer and closer and the offset becomes less and less. But as for our fuel load, we are taking the standard 30-minute fuel load to ensure we can make it to the end of the game unscathed on fuel capacity. We begin our analysis then by noting that we're able to saunter off to the side of the map and hunt down an enemy Halifax by combining 2 key strengths of the P-63A-5, that being its burst climb rate, whereby this plane can sprint to altitude rather rapidly, although it cannot consistently climb to extreme altitude compared to the likes of the Messerschmitt 19F4 at its battle rating as easily, typically requiring you to level out at an altitude of 4,000 metres or so. But when you do level out, if you can make sure that you can keep this plane level in flight, although it does have a tendency to incline its nose slightly when going in a straight line, you'll be able to accelerate extremely well, going from your stall speed of 130 km an hour to 440 km an hour on engine power alone rather rapidly, and with war emergency power you'll kick this up to 530 km an hour in terms of a limit. And that's enabled us to catch up to this Halifax and go for the kill on them, and we're going to see how devastating the 37mm cannon can be, as the Halifax is one of those more durable bombers we'll typically face at our battle rating tier, and after throwing in 5 successful shots, we take them out the sky completely, both wings coming off. That's our first kill. Now in return, taking some light machine gun fire, we note that the durability of the P-63A-5 is rather unique, in the fact that when you go into a head-to-head situation, you're not going to take engine damage as easily as your aggressors, whereby your engine is located behind the cockpit, not in front of it. And typically in a head-to-head, what's the first part of the plane that's going to get hit? It's the nose, because that's what's pointing towards the enemy's incoming fire. And in return, if your nose gets hit, you're not going to take engine damage here, whereas a good number of your foes, such as the Messerschmitt 19F4 or a P-47 Thunderbolt, etc., all have their engines located in the nose and are more likely to take damage in that regard. On top of that, your durability in general is rather good, whereby you can absorb a good number of 20mm cannon shells, alternatively machine gun fire, although it should be noted that you are less durable when somebody is directly on your 6 shooting into your tail section, because then the shells are going to travel past the tail section into the engine and do considerable damage to your engine. And when it starts to go orange in particular, you'll notice a drop off of approximately 50 to 75% of your engine performance, which is incredibly punishing and means you need to go land immediately. Now, having stalled out the Messerschmitt 19F for our friendly G55 to pick up the kill, we take down the Spitfire Mark IIB there with a single 37mm cannon shell impacts on their fuselage, and we can see the sheer ferocity of the 37mm cannon. Then in return, as we go for a reload, we should note that reloads are going to be long in terms of our cannon, and we need to take them when there's a clear gap in the fighting. Our machine guns load rather quickly, and we can use those as an interim measure, but the focus is coming down to the cannon due to its overall power, meaning that we can dispatch any foe very quickly with some well aimed fire. At this point, at an altitude of 5,000 metres, gradually increasing, we should note that the maximum ideal altitude limit for this plane is no more than 4,500 metres altitude, whereby you do not lose engine power at this point. That comes in at 5,500 metres altitude and slowly dropping off once you start to get into the region of 6,000 metres plus. But more importantly, it's the control surfaces at 4,500 metres altitude which begin to suffer, particularly the elevator, which seems to become incredibly heavy at this point, and in particular carrying out loops with the elevator becomes incredibly dangerous, whereby you'll bleed a huge amount of your energy, if not all of your energy, and be forced into an inverted stall by going into a loop at say 4,500 metres altitude. Even if you started that loop at say 375 km an hour, you really need to keep your speed up if you're going to use loops or follow somebody in their loop at such high altitude. So to avoid this issue, we opt to try and keep our altitude a little bit lower, and our ideal altitude range as a result actually gets positioned between 2,000 and 4,000 metres, where this looping issue is no longer a problem. Supporting our G55 for a bit in case they get the Spitfire on their 6 for example, i.e. the head-to-head doesn't work out, but they get a clean kill on them, very good job to them, we decide to take things a little bit lower at this point. And what we can see is in the midst of a dive, or boom and zoom tactics, the dive speed acceleration of the P-63A-5 is very good, whereby it can rival the best at the battle rating tier, including the likes at lower battle ratings such as the P-47 Thunderbolt. and it means you can swoop down on foes and with a clear shot on target, rip them to pieces, whereby you maintain a huge amount of controllability at high speed. To emphasise this, your roll rate, which is very high to begin with and one of the best if not the best at your batter rating, it starts off very good, and once you go from 700 to 800 km now, you'll lose 25% of your roll rate, which is not punishing at all. For your rudder, which is very strong as well, to the point where you can flat turn very quickly, and it will really help you out in tight turns where you've rolled the plane 90 degrees and pulled up on the elevator and you want to come around even quicker by using your rudder. You'll find that between 700 and 800 km an hour, you'll lose 50% of your rudder's performance, but you can still keep the precision in aiming where your shots are going in the dive. And in terms of your elevator, which is average at best because it is a rather heavy control surface, although nowhere near as heavy as when you get to 4,500 meters plus, you'll find that between 800 and 850 km an hour, you'll lose 25% of your elevator's performance, which is not too much of an issue either, because with so much speed built up, you can typically get into your loop, so you pull out the dive quickly enough to avoid going into the ground or crashing into a target you're coming onto the 6 of. And at lower altitude, particularly below 2,000 meters altitude, your elevator works to the point where your loops are incredibly tight, being able to rival preceding planes all the way at lower batter ratings, such as the P-63A-1 Lancer, which we reviewed some time ago, link available in the top right corner of your screen as displayed now. But the difficulty of all this is that you've got a package orientated for high speed pursuit and high speed boom and zoom. And what you'll find is that sometimes you've really got to go for your targets to be able to pick up the kills, as we now swoop down on a Messerschmitt 19 or a Hurricane, we're waiting to pick our target at the last moment. The problem is you can build up so much speed in the dive that if you don't control your dive appropriately, or your opponent doesn't provide you with a clear path, this can really be to your detriment. Although there we saw how we caught the Messerschmitt 19 by surprise as they're in a clean path, and we also picked up the Hurricane mid-turn, or as they were coming out of a turn and proceeding towards the head-on, giving us our ace. The idea behind the P-63A-5 in the boom and zoom category of play is to take your foes by surprise by being so fast that you're going to get onto their 6 and hit them hard before they've even realised you've been in that position to do so. And with your maximum dive speed being 962 km an hour, you're not going to have any difficulty in hitting your foes hard and fast, as this is a maximal dive speed which is able to rival anything that you'll see at the batter rating tier, all the way up to the 4.7 level, although some planes are pushing towards 1000 km an hour at this point. In pursuing the G55 now, we're going to see that in terms of turn fighting, you can in this aircraft turn fight with a foe, whereby the G55 has roughly the same manoeuvrability. Our turn circle is a tiny bit tighter as we set their tail section on fire using our cannon, and we decide at this point, rather than pursue, we may as well break away because they're going to burn to death. We've shredded the fuselage of that plane with the cannon shell. Your turn circle is average at best, able to rival the likes of your Kovlev Yak-3 and a C205, or a G55 as well as we pick up our 6th kill. And with the powerful flat rudder responsiveness of this plane, whereby you can flat rudder turn very nicely, it means that you can really cut your turns tight so long as you keep your speed up, whereby your ideal speed is between 400 and 650 km an hour, meaning that you'll have full responsiveness to your controls at this point, especially within the ideal altitude range of 2,000 to 4,000 meters altitude. Why not below 2,000 meters altitude? Well, I wouldn't discredit below 2,000 meters altitude, but what you have to keep in mind is your strength is the ability to maintain speed, and if you end up in a turn fight below 2,000 meters altitude, you inertly take away your ability to be able to dive away from your opponents because you're at such a low altitude, which is why you want some altitude to be able to conduct your diving attacks or your diving escapes, because remember, you're fast at the end of the day, as iterated earlier. Now what about energy retention? Well, energy retention in this plane again is alarmingly good, whereby your straight line energy retention when coming out of a diving pass is to the point where as soon as you head below 750 km an hour, the bleed off of your speed is very, very slow, and it means that you can pull distance on foes extremely quickly unless they've dived down on you from approximately 1000 meters altitude above. The likes of P-51 Mustang, i.e. the Cannon Mustang, will need to dive down on you from 1500 meters above you when you've gone into your initial dive to be able to outrun you, and this puts you in a great position. In terms of vertical energy retention, you'll find that coming out of boom and zoom passes, you'll be able to retain the majority of the energy you sacrifice at mid-dive. Only when you go to in excess of 850 km an hour does this not become possible, whereby in a 30-degree angle of recline, you'll find that you'll lose approximately 750 meters altitude. And as for this C205C1 dogfight here, we're going to see how our manoeuvrability rivals them, and we can use our great roll rate in particular to make sure we can control our position on their 6 and not overcompensate and overextend in front of them. Unfortunately, however, we're also highlighting one of the issues at this point, which is because of the focus on the 37mm cannon, or at least in our case, if you happen to miss the foe, it can be incredibly frustrating, because we're having to compensate for for the 37mm cannon's lead rather than our machine gun lead. If we had the aiming reticle for our machine gun lead, by now that plane would be ripped to pieces, or if we'd particularly gone to try and compensate for our machine guns. Which is why you can become incredibly cannon focused in this plane, and you'll want to practice getting used to just using your machine guns as well as the cannon, so that way you don't become so focused as to miss every shot. And that's one thing I found when I first started flying this plane fully upgraded, is that because I was so focused on using the cannon, and I still am to an extent, it meant that a lot of the time I'd open fire on a foe, and if I didn't score hits with a 37mm cannon, nothing was happening. And in return I get frustrated because I think to myself that the guns aren't registering hits. No, it's because I'm not providing enough lead to hit with a 37mm cannon, and I'm not providing the right amount of lead to hit with the machine guns. Now going into another reload and pulling away, what we saw there is that when the C-205 crashed into the mountain, it may have been because they weren't paying attention, perhaps they're worrying about the 37mm cannon hitting them. We can't tell for sure, but there is a fear factor with this plane, that when it's on someone's 6, they're going to be alarmed to the fact, my goodness, there's a 37mm cannon breathing down on my neck, I need to take evasive action and get the hell out of here. And because of that fear factor, you're both a plane which nobody wants to get near when they know you're coming, and at the same time a plane that people want to get out of the sky as quickly as possible because of the amount of damage it can do. But not worrying about that as such, what about stall recovery finally? Well, stall recovery is fast, whereby when you stall, you become incredibly unstable as an airplane, particularly your rudder starts to shake from left to right very badly, and you can even see that when we level out from going into a small climb there for the Z1007. The rudder shakes continuously, even at higher speeds in excess of 400 km an hour. But your stall recovery is 200 km an hour, you'll get there incredibly fast, but you want to let your speed get up to 300 km an hour at least to prevent the instability in the plane in general, as we don't provide enough lead on the Z1007 here, and the game finally comes to its end. And with that, let's go take a look at the post-game stats. With our 7 kills, we're able to pick up 29,978 silver lions and 3,028 research points. To defeat the P-63A-5 Kingcobra in a given matchup then, I can recommend one particular approach, and that is to lure this fighter into a low speed turn fight, particularly below 300 km an hour. The reasoning behind this is, at 300 km an hour and decreasing, this plane becomes perilously close to starting to experience stall effects, which come in as early as 235 km an hour, despite the stall speed of this plane being 130 km an hour. This means that there's a high chance once you start going below 235 km an hour, this plane is going to hang limp in the air and provide a clean target for the opposition. But on top of that, before you even get to this point, the elevator below 300 km an hour becomes extremely heavy, to the point that looping in this plane takes an extreme amount of time and means that you're going to be hanging limp in the sky once more. And a good number of planes at your batter rating or around it will be able to outloop you at such low speeds. These include, but are not limited to, the Yakovlev Yak-3, the Spitfire Mark IIB, and the I-16 Type 27. On top of this, you have to consider that at lower speeds, as mentioned earlier on in this review, the rudder becomes unstable and starts to wiggle from side to side. And if you continuously abuse the rudder in this plane, you'll have to spend a good amount of time trying to straighten it out before building up speed and starting over again in the turn fight. And this is all time you're losing to your opposition, who's coming around on your 6. And once they get a clean shot on your 6, it'll typically mean you're going to take engine damage as well as tail damage due to the location of your engine being behind the cockpit. But by avoiding such circumstances today, in our own P-63A-5 Kingcobra, hopefully we demonstrated that this plane is a continuation and a significant improvement upon the preceding P-39Q5 Aerocobra, whereby it maintains the same firepower output, but it improves on its engine power, whether it be in a straight line in terms of acceleration or with increase in altitude. In return, giving this plane the ability to pursue down foes rather rapidly, in particular enemy bombers, and wreak havoc upon them. And at higher speeds as well, we find that the controllability of this plane is a major step up compared to its preceding Aerocobra counterparts, whereby you now have the ability to go into extreme speed boom and zoom dives all the way up to your maximum dive speed of 962 km an hour and maintain almost full control, in return allowing you to take your foes by surprise. So perhaps this may not be the ideal boom and zoom fighter for some pilots out there, but if you enjoyed the P-39Q Aerocobra, you'll definitely enjoy this plane, and if you weren't a fan of the P-39Q Aerocobra, well, perhaps this quick fix means that you will start to enjoy the Kingcobras, as it's got much more suitable flying characteristics for such high-speed combat. And so I've been TX141, and if you have enjoyed this video, why not leave a like, comment or subscribe for future War Thunder videos on my channel. But until next time, as always, ladies and gentlemen, take care, and good luck in the skies.